Barodactyl, core lines and communications into percipito lobes. A frontal lobe gauge, core centers into cage screen adaptation lines to EA, lines to high interference into E, line conditions, all of the S and C, escape. Core lines, communication lines of high interference. Lines communicate to a system like escape in a room and direct lines modifications. That's good. Uses location and travels. Directing lines at the film strip in line rotation cycles. The metric core center line communication mandating now. The film strip is ending. So if it ends, line of communication has to get into a new reel. And that line's a communication system. Now, in that applications, they have to really get into modification setting now. More and more into the 144. That applies to the location setting. They change the laws of crystalline. Change all communication of silicone to the carbon. Directing lines in anti-carry. Directing all modification of the skelter and screen lines adaptation lines of surface. Retracking position location in all line settings. Take them out of time relapse. In position of time record. Line conditions of coordinating system. Travel lines, modification of the ground, centers, and surface. Set position lines of high calculating system. So we will have Q&A and line rotations. I'll go through graph communication, screen lines, and weather. Now the line indication system, like I said, the test is just self-based in that positions. Try to understand how to communicate to higher limits of sequence. Your body frame, correlations frame, your track frames, and inhibitor frames. Line signals in modification grounds. That's going to explain G. Setting core lines equals lines of G over lines of L. Okay, now core lines of level is lines high center locations, L lines of G and position location in the system. Light. Travel point lines of graph into 4 box lines of X's. Travel 4 lines of signals in 1 set position of travel. Change communication directions into modification grounds into L lines of J tracks and set position lines of calculations. Setting communication high center interference of grounds. Center core lines of powers and direct location system into all line communication lines into an island in track communications. Setting lines of communication high center position location operation. Mothership. All right. Now we're going to go through the center lines of course centers in the mothership interactions and direct signals. Now it stays in signals in line screen adaptations high center position. All right. Cross line symbols and platforms as set lines. Set line position over 4 lines of 3 over 7. Setting ground line symbolism, lines of track locations, and crossing line signals in set position of the platform. Process calculation ground center line position locations. Signify in position lines of decimal points line position locations. Changing track lines, high center of 0, 0, 4 lines of set position of 1, 1, 1. 3 lines of signals, set core lines of 3, 3, 3. Track location lines, modulation screen, adaptation lines of service. Getting across core lines into lines in high position locations. Rebellion line, galactic federation. Now I can balance communication lines that equalize the core. Line conditions over lines, high center interference of flux over triangulation of box. Directing lines X, Y, Z, line conditions setting console lines, modulation screens. Getting direct signals into all communication setting, into mothership and track locations. All right, coming out of line screen adaptations, processing 1 and position 2 and 3 tractions. 3 lines of calculations. All right. Now, getting that line communication lines, high center interference. Start with the right line signal into the left lines of traction. Center line operation of set lines puts all communication high center interference. Setting above line signals, process communication high centers. Ground system, all through travel. Open sequence, open panel. See, does it through its modification system of center operation of traffic inventory. Setting lines, flux lines, communication lines into all core centers in 0 traction. Box frame, TV frames, correlation system, lines of patterns, and position location of 2 lines, cycles, and traction. Directing core line signals into modification ground lines of symbolism. Process lines of 1, open signal location system, all the calculations. Set operation lines of surface and track locations. All right. But all signals into modification grounds. All right. All right. So mothership has to get ready in line screen adaptations. We're going to start off with 3 lines of meters, lines of metric, lines of volume, and balance. Now we'll go through core lines of calculation lines into tablets and templates. Setting lines of communication high center interference into volume. Platitude line screen adaptations into frame position. All right. Set core line settings is the Allen and track line communications. Mothership, right? Now, waving center lines alpha, delta, theta, and omega line screen in 1 box frame and track locations. Right. Sound town line grounds. Getting communication lines of waves. Central line communications, and 3 track location of provision in cycles. Setting communication over cross location system, all through track location to a setting operation system. Process calculation high center interference, setting volumes into 3 lines of sectors in position of 4 settings. Process line direct signals crossing line in position locations and force sequence of panels in track location. All right. Now we go through centers, lines of one cycle, one center, one travel, one rotation, one track lines in modulation, screen adaptation of surface. And communication, process line signals into cross location lines of measure. Scales communication high position of balance into all levels in line communication of crevice. Calculate modify line condition setting road graph screens, labels in communication lines and plasma screen. Directing in position location modulations and ground lines of surface and plasma line set locations of enter. Directing in communications size interference, modulation screen lines, high position location system. So we get a 3-minute track line that gets course centers lines of 3 metric meters, scales lines of volume. Directing signal locations 1.5, 1.5. Setting line, split lines, anomaly, and triangulation reline settings in position location of 3 lines of power, 2 lines of symbolism, and 1 track locations into an island. Indirect signals of center communication, operation, surface interaction. All right, symbolism lines of 1, 2, panel lines of position of Merkaba test or contention region, process lines of platforms, 3 lines of signals, 4 lines of settings in process communications. All right, expanding the crevice lines of energy line screen, directed signals modification, ground center lines of 3, ground center lines of 2, ground center lines of 1, ground center lines of setting in position line of 0, and calculation screen line. Process calculation highest interference, modulate the screen lines adaptation of the surface into ground line surface line. The line signal location is headed to the mothership and traction. That's the mothership. Setting lines of highest interference, longitude, latitude, and set position, right? Setting communication lines of bandwidth and line signals in 5 platforms of communications. Ground centers, cross line signals, and line position location to a system, all through tractions, right? So get the team lines of measure, scale line communication system, put them in line screen adaptations in all signals in modification setting of center. See how it moved the cycle? All right. Setting line course centers, solar line rotations, and set position location of satellite interactions. Directing cross line signals in modification lines of solar and echo line and screen adaptations of flux. Process line over line cross location system to the mothership and track locations of mutation. Process lines of 1, process lines of grounds, setting communication highest interference. Mutation grounds, allocate time frames and flux over 1 in position lines of travel, line condition setting. Setting core lines highest interference, getting into all position location to a system, all through travel. Mocking line, core line settings of zeros over seconds, line communication to its surface. Getting the mothership in line screen adaptations and all levels of processing. And set position location to a system, all through calculations. Okay. All right. So apply it to division location setting, but module lines, scanners, line communication monitors, line rotation service interactions, setting lines of course centers, lines of platform, directing lines of length, it process lines of signals in center communication system through operation. All right, set core line centers into team lines and travels in 3 lines of communication. Process lines of singulation line rotation, process communication lines of flux over lines, communication lines of high setting. Flip lines of signals, rotation surface, and position magnetic force. Directing communication high interference into the island itself. Process line, signal line, and direct signals and modifications. Oh, not there. Energy is too powerful. Got to bring it again in line rotations. Is it there? Is it the application? There we go. Interactions. All right, so we've got the island above. Outlines of 10,000 line meters. And deck line and screen adaptations. Process lines of 1. Flux over 2 in plasma line screen. Directing signals modification, ground center line condition setting, open sequence of Cloud City interactions. Have fun. All right. So it's on standpoint now, right? So it's above the ether, it's above the core, it's above the firmaments, it's now universal lines of space. Okay, boom, right there. Have fun. All right. So your applied division locations are here. All right, the teams here, 144s are here, line position of center communications. Now you just have to get into warping, time sequence, times calculation, time panel. Have fun. All right. Now, you got a swirl line. The set core lines of highest interference and divots over transitions over lines over pi. Puts all communication in the mothership and travel. Points lines of highest interference and metric core centers, energetic line domes, and line rotation surface and track locations. All right. Okay. 30 minutes on line rotation. All right. Now we're going to get into higher communication setting and modules and line conditions, how you guys have to get into instructions, how to basically fly a mothership. And when I say fly, it's not like an angel or anything location. Flying, floating, levitating, or walking. Process communications, all line direct signals of laser. Now we have to really understand how to modify that set of locations. So we're going to consoles and 3 lines of tractions, right? Directing lines of right signal and positional left lines of space. Process lines of 3 signals in thumb imprints, right? 3 lines of cycles. Set core line settings into navigation screen and process lines of L, lines of C over 1, okay? So you get into communication lines of ground, core lines of high centers up, and track location lines of 3. Coming into communication lines of interdimensional space line, core line settings indicate system, and console lines of Fibonacci line rotations into star line screen adaptation of surface attractions. Okay, let's understand how to control mothership lines of signals. So given that communication lines, you have to have a flux line screen and position lines to a data frame, central frame, and a main frame correlation lines of traction. All right. Now put lines of grounds, set lines of symbolism, location, system, and travel. Okay. So again, that communication line has interference of flux over X lines of 1 and travel communications. Directing symbolism, cross lines, high interference, line signals, puts lines of 0, 0, and 0 attractions, set lines of indicator lines in position of A track, B lines, and C in center, as set position of console. Okay, very complicated stuff to basically how to navigate and time warp a mothership. So it depends on the size, the mass, but it's an anchoring freighter crate. It's correlates since it's a crevice. It sets position location to its system. So it's all calculated, modified through Cloud City. That's what a mothership is. Okay, guys? All right. So now we just have to understand how to use it in modulation setting, location to system and consoles. Understand its navigation system, how to go through tractions. There's different lines of signals. Now let's get into lines of communication, high center, position location indications. Setting lines of 1 arrow indication setting. Process lines of 2, process lines of 3, and traction. 3 lines of different lines of travel. Now remember, process lines of 1 is a center core system of center, right? Setting offline communication, off lines its position location of center. Okay, remember, you're in a mothership. And if you go to a downline, shift line, cross line communications, you're overriding system location of its mothership. So you don't want to do that, right? Because it actually comes into the position location of its city and track locations to its earth and ground lines of surface and track location. So you don't want to do this. Okay. So it's part of the understand the earth line, where it is in track location modulation settings, right? Accelerating, mocking line, high rotation of lines of surface and track communication system. Measured lines of scales, balanced communication lines of flux. Flux lines of 1 equals lines, like an XT line, into 1,000 line meters, into 1,000 yards, into 1,000 locations, into 1,000 perimeters, into 1,000 set positions, into 1,000 laser attractions, into Skynet equals lines of flux over travel. Okay, very complicated stuff, but it's a lot of fun. All right. Setting lines of tracks, set position lines, breaking things down in line screen adaptations of flux over screen adaptations and position of processing. All right, so correlates in the lines XT1000, applied to 1, right? Cross lines, systematic lines, over cross location lines, and 2 track location, right? Now we change the graph communications in settings that measure the scales of a ruler and track location. Very complicated stuff. So central waves, correlation waves, center lines of meter waves, directing in modification ground centers. Flux over 1 in position of processing. Now we come in position location lines into weather indicators, directing lines of sound tones in line rotation surface and track locations of voicing grids. Setting communication high symbol location system all through travel in flux over lines over screen. Directing calculate modify line core line style communication system to its islands itself in set position. So you got to get in position locations, how to get in the navigations to its mothership and travel in a 4-line signal. Alpha line screens, directing lines of modification centers and travel communications. All right. Setting lines of perimeters, the 3 lines of tractions, 3 lines of travel. All right. Setting communication lines of 0 lines and C lines of rotation lines of travel. Directing communication lines of C line rotation lines of 1 lines of travel. Directing lines of skyline grids and position over line sequence lines of travel. Calculate modify lines of communication setting, waving central systems and channel. Very complicated stuff, but it's a lot of fun, right? Now, has a modulation screen, correlation panel, and track lines communication system. All through tractions, all through mothership and setting. Okay? Sound waving patterns, directing in modification grounds. Remember, you got to get position lines of gauging, right? Understand the gauges and how to modify the locations. You're looking at 3-track division. Right-hand symbol, center line, left line symbol, okay? Right line traction, center line communication interference, left line space lines of traction, all right? So keep yourself balanced is the center operation of view. If you get a box line center, you stay in the center, right? So it doesn't matter how many times I spin it. If I spin it in 3 tractions, it doesn't matter. It stays in the center. It stays in the center. So you have to use the mind. You have to use the telepathy of the mind. So you balance at the mothership. It stays in the center, right? It doesn't do this through emotion. It doesn't do this through emotion, right? You can't do that, right? Because you got the city below in set positions and all lines of its earth and traction. Okay? So I want you guys to understand these things, right? Because you're getting position locations of flying a mothership now in the cities of its crevice that's anchoring its system in travel. It can't be below 10,000 deck. All right. So understand the interjoining graph and communication lines of video graph screens directs all communication lines and signatures of panels. This all communicates setting to a Schumann resonance. Now the mothership lines its ground lines. Let's get position location and perimeters, lines of scanning into moderations and models, right? Directing lines of 1, XT1000 comes in tractions and directions, right? Then we have an XT2000 and higher lines of sound waves and travel in echo chambers, directing sonar line rotation settings, travel point lines of graph, and center communications of ground centers that shifts the anomalies and crop circles, directing lines of 3 lines in code weaving, transformation screen lines adaptations of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, lines of 7, and tractification of 0. Complicated stuff, but it's a lot of fun, right? But look at it up close and travel, right? So you're always going to see the mothership in set position locations and setting here, always in system, right? And then a laser down some tractions like this in travel, okay? So you get XT1000 here, you get XT1000 here, you get XT1000 here, you get XT2000 here. You got the XT1000. It's like playing football, right? Lines and yards and all that in position locations, right? So the unifications of systems get bigger in traction. All right. So the mothership is here, the island's here, in set position, right? So in that line rotations, that's what you're protecting. Okay, that's the mothership, right? Now, understanding the acceleration line screen, let's go into 3 minutes in tractions. Now that puts lines of 3 years to shift its anomaly. 3 years in space, guys. 3 minutes on Earth, 3 years, right? Because you got to change the metric meters, the scales, the balance, and the console communication setting to travel. Take it out of line screen adaptation, process lines of 1, process lines of 2, process lines of 6, and process lines of 8 in travel. Directing symbolism line course centers to change the metric course centers in its direct signals and modifications. So it's got to change its shape back into the center of operation surface, right? 3 minutes on Earth, 3 years in space, right? Gets out of the cloud screen, right? This is the cloud. Cloak and daggers its system and lines its screen line adaptation to its system all through tractions, right? But I'm just showing you exactly how it's set up. It's like a chessboard, right? You have a chessboard. Okay, let's go through panel screens. Directing signal lines of platforms 1. Let's go in position locations of platform 2. Okay, and then we go in position locations of platform 3. And then we go into position lines of platform 4. And then we go in position lines of platform 5. Let's start with 5 platforms, right? Directing signals. Mothership is here in setting, all right? So XT1000 here, XT1000 here, XT2000 here, XT14000 here, XT30,000 here in tractions. So the mothership is always in setting, and you have civilities that actually lives in the city, right? Now that's in the 20-meter line screen adaptations of flux over volume that sets course centers of platforms, directing line signal location system all through calculations. So that's lines of signal location to a system all through tractions, all through wormhole, and process communication line grounds and set position of surface and travel. Okay, change course lines, change direct signals and coordinates. No, it changed the opposite direction. There we go on travel. Okay. Modulation screens. Let's go through inhibitors over line, rotation, surface, and ground communications. All right, so we had a couple lines here, interference and constellation grounds, set position lines of eye centers, rotate the surface into 4-line tractions, indirect signals, modification system, and models and traction. Very complicated stuff, but it's a lot of fun. All right. I know you guys are going to have a lot of questions for this because it's very complicated to really understand how to get in positions of navigating a mothership and travel. Okay. But that's how it's set up. So think of the lines of core, line direct signal, Merkabah, tesseract, and tetrahedron. 3 lines of equal lines of screens, right? So if you bring it in, you can see the screens, right? There's not 2 in position and settings. See the blocks? Look at this. Let's bring them in. See the boxes? You got to come in close, right? So that's where you put them in and travel. 4 line signals in position lines of 4 tractions. Now we bring them out and travel communications. Point lines of graph. Now the central system is the center core lines of the mothership. It's always the above signal, and then we have Vega here in line rotation, right? Mothership above, Vega there. Position lines, Asgard. Asgard's here in travel communications, right? Asgard is the center operation of everything in transition, right? Then we come into lines of center in position of platforms, Rainbow and Frost Spirit interactions, right? Boom. Anything lines, ground lines is your Earth interactions. There's your Earth and rotation surface in position, location, and measure. That's how it's set up. That's how it's set up, okay? So, flicking the switch, we get a core lines of communication to its ground lines, a shift lines of communications, right? So I want you guys to really understand on a 4-line signal, to really understand how to navigate everything in set position, all levels in a signal line formation screen line. Coming into modification grounds in line screen adaptations of flux and track locations, right? So it's very important you understand that, right? So let's do this again. I know everybody's blown away, right? No. So try to understand, all this is done from inside sitting, right? So let's go again. You got the Earth, right? And you got the cities. Okay, there's the cities, right? The towns, specifications, right? All right, there's lights. Okay, there's the lights right there, right? There's your Earth, right? All right, so you got the center core system, right? Asgard. It's Asgard, right? Set position, Vega. Okay, and then you got the mothership. Okay, guys? That's all it is. And everything around it is the XT1000s that protects its system all through tractions. Okay? That's how it's set up. Okay? So every second meter, line to direct signals. It modificates the grounds. Now, the communication of the grounds open all signals in the modification system. Seconds, lines of high center interference. Sending lines, communication lines of high center interference. Zero correlations equals lines of light speed. Light speed. Everything is 0 tractions and O-line screen. Atmosphere line, stratmosphere line, set correlations in hemisphere line. Now, line signals, line communications to all levels to a bio line or a brainium communication sending to surface. Process lines, mothership comes in and travel, right? Rotates the system in line screen adaptation setting to travel in communications, right? XT1000 comes out, line ground lines, high center interference, and travel endpoint communications. Sets lines of Earth and rotation surface, track locations. Directing core lines, into line signals comes line signal location, another XT1000 process communications. Process lines of one signal into crop circles. That's why we have crop circles on Earth, guys. And your Earth line rotation surface interactions. Code moving lines into moderation lines into levels of code travels, line conditions, code tractions, and direct signals. Now we flip the switch. What do we have in communication? Surface interaction. The opposite line, right? Energetic lines, 5 line signals in process communication, high interference. So you can actually flip the actual city upside down and travel, right? So center core system lines of up and line signals and cross communication center, a center communication system all through tractions. Okay, it's a lot of fun. Set a 4-line signal and flux over line. Now I got you guys in your decimals. Now getting in triangulation lines of high interference is splitting the triangle in half. Right? So what do you come into? Your primer circuits, right? See that? See the opening, right? 3-line signals, 1, 2, 3, and 4 settings of tether. Process over line, cross location lines of highways and track location. Directing lines of pi, okay? And mothership and travel, okay? Mothership travels lines of point lines of graph in its own traffic inventories, screen lines adaptation of service. XT1000's platitudes divisions, you're always going to see XT1000s protecting the mothership and travel. Always, 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 always. In position lines, high sending line rotations in track location through system. All right? So it's always in moderation lines, core lines of panels, flux over line, direct signals in platforms and travels and communications. Okay? And again, you flick the switch, you have center communication. Okay. So you have to understand how to levitate your grounds, your powers, your atmospheres, your modems, your Wi-Fi, your satellite, your towers, because they all link together. And when you understand how they link together, it's much easier to process this and really understand how it all works and set position, location, and settings, all through track location and setting and position location to its cloud city, into its mothership and travel. Up close, see? Cloud city. Get past the core, ether lines, and firmaments and interactions. Center operation and setting, right? So when you're bringing it out line, you're bringing it in lines of core. That has interception lines and planet lines and set position location to a system, all through sonar. Okay. Echo lines of one, echo lines of out. Okay. Echo lines in position locations of out. Inline rotations of center track location. Right. Mothership is in center position. Okay. Crossing lines into all lines. Mothership is in position. Right. So everything is coming out of frame, out of division, out of location, out of box frame, right? So it comes and travels in lines of screen lines and 3 lines of communication lines of center. So it's really interesting when you come into that level, when you flick the switch again, and set position location to its traffic highways and inventory, right? See its traction, change this direct location to its system, right? So as a county measure, lines, screen lines, adaptation setting to flux lines of 1. 1 lines equals lines of flux, and flux lines, communication lines of Fibonacci, and position location of travel, right? Mothership comes in and direct signal, all right? Flux over Y, flux over 1 equals lines of 2, air indication lines, travel of in-point lines of graph, Fibonacci lines in a box frame in line position of center of modulation, okay? Modulation, guys, okay? See the intelligence? Look, here's the intelligence. There's the face, right? See the pie? Everything's a face, guys. Everything's a face. Okay, that's what's monitoring the mothership. All right, so understanding platforms is understanding the position of speed line and travels in position location, what a mothership does in tractions. But it's always lines all in position location to a system. All right, so to understand the Earth, your cities, what's going on, position location to your system and travel. Ground lines of Earth. Ground lines, position location of the angelics, set position locations of Vega, and position locations of mothership above. Okay, that's how it all is in signal and position location of the calculations. All right, so now understanding travel lines, we have a direct lines in panels of waving screen adaptations, process lines of communications. Now, getting direct line is line screen adaptations, all those of processing lines of indication system, all through platform. Okay, all through platform of travel. Very powerful, isn't it? Try to understand what's going on in set positions, guys. A lot of fun, right? So everything is set up through a pyramid line. Now you have to understand what a Merkaba is. Let's start with this, all right? Let's start with that, right? So again, mothership is always here. Always, always, always. Vega is inside. Mothership is outside. Okay, so the center operation in set position is the Agelix, Asgard, right? Anything below sequence is set position of beta wave. Set core lines of alpha wave. So it's not alpha, beta, okay? Above is alpha, beta, below is beta, alpha, all right? Signal line, highest interference of downshift, cross location, upline, shift line setting. Process lines of 1. Set coordinate centers, line direct signals, set lines of Earth, in rotation system, in traction. Very powerful stuff, right? Beta, alpha, alpha, beta. All right, now you have to understand position location inhibitors, cross line symbolism, cross lines of grounds, in position lines of power, in magnetic high line settings, in mothership, in rotations of cloak and dagger, inside position. Okay? But that's how it's set up, guys. Okay, going through the beta alpha or the alpha beta, all right? So now you have to understand your central systems when it comes into central waves. Now, central waves is the mainframe. Mainframe core lines and box frame, electrical frame. Travel lines indicates the system of 4 panels. Locations, high center interference, and line locations, see? As soon as I perceive consciousness, I'm in the center. Okay? Now I'm controlling everything. All right, I'm controlling everything because I'm in the center now and I'm perceiving everything in consciousness, right? Mothership goes here. XT1000 goes here. Okay. I can even move the agilex in set position. I can move the agilex, which is amazing. The actual platform, right? Because I'm creator, right? Sending core lines, highest interference, XT30,000 in travel, right? So that's what I do. I put everything in set position order of what I'm going to do in seconds, minutes, and hours, and how everything comes in perceiving of consciousness. Where the mothership's going to be, where Asgard's going to be, where Vega's going to be, or lines of communication settings, right? The process of the foundations, not how you are in that position of location to calculate setting, right? Because everybody is connected to all some intelligence, and all intelligence is connected to you in information lines and grounds in that position location system. So it's basically how you see yourself as polarity. It's about understand how you see yourself as a library. It's all about how you see yourself as stargates and portals. It's all about how you see yourself as Vega, or how you see yourself as Asgard. Okay, guys? That's all it is in directions. All right, so now we get into line screen. Subspecification, highest interference, setting lines of one signal. It's the opposite direct signals and modifications. That's the split, right? When you split 1 and 1, right? Then you got the primer circuits, 1, 2, and 3 settings of primer. Okay. Now this road graph, the screen lines, adaptation lines, high position locations. What number do you see in sequence? What number? What number? What number do you see? In set position. What number is that? 4, right? 4, 4, right? So that's position lines of alpha, beta. Beta, alpha. Okay, now, alpha line screen has inhibitors, lines, and track communication setting that solar lines of screen line adaptations of flux. Solar line core centers of travel. Now, communication high centers, beta wave rotates the system and travel inputs this location and setting. Process lines of indication system, that's where it comes into levels of mountain surface and lines of communication system, all through inhibitors. Right, the mountains. You have to understand why we have mountains. You have to understand why we have volcanoes. Everything has a position lines attractions, all through measured scale, and line communications and moderation system, all through gauging, all lines, core centers, and position of flux, and travel in position location to a system, all through track locations. Okay? But always see it in a 4-line communications. Always, 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 all right? Never see it on a flat surface of one system. See it in circulation rotations, traveling very, very fast. Okay, guys? Circulation rotations, start with that. Okay? So you're in the center. Now, when you perceive what you want to perceive. You do what you want to do. All right? Mothership is here. Okay? You got the XT1000s on standby and 3 settings in set position. Right? So that's all it is. Once you understand that, then you add set positions. But your Merkaba has to have ground, powers, and atmospheres. So you got to have 1 position, 2 panels, and 3 positions. You have to have 3 lines. And you have 3 lines, communication, highest interference. Then you come into the magnetic highway and set position. That's 4 settings, right? Then you have the central system of your highways and tractions, the inventories. Now that opens up doors in sequence and lines of electrical line grids, electrical line panels, and diffusion lines of rotations, panel communication, highest interference, and position of flux over traction. Okay? Very busy in space, guys. Very busy. Right? So you get your grounds, powers, and atmospheres. And that position location, 3 signals and 3 tractions. Right? And then you got 4 lines. Okay? So it's about understanding how to use that in platforms of its mothership and its island and screen line. Okay? Cloak and dagger. There, you can't see it, but it's there, right? So you open up the panels, fits lines, highest interference. Now downshift lines an anomaly. Anything below the earth line, like I said, is beta alpha. Beta alpha. All right. It's a position location above the line signal of center operation system. Anything at track location lines is alpha beta. Okay. Now signifies lines green. Now the platforms of A change the lines of communication lines across lines of B. Timeline sequence, line course centers, lines of travel. Now the platform lines of A process lines of A, lines of position lines of C. Setting platform communication system, platforms 1 in platforms 2 in platforms 3 of center of communication. Very complicated stuff, guys. Okay. So you start with the ground lines, the powers, and the atmospheres. So in that line rotations. So there's an A track, right? So nobody can pass that because that is higher lines, of course, centers into the stratosphere, into the bio, and into the brain system locations, A track locations. So that's alpha lines of B, AB equals lines of C, all right? Set lines of high center interference C equals line center correlation lines of D in track location. Directing core lines, this is all moderations of the mothership, guys. You have to study the alphabetical system and understand how to use its modules, its gauges, and track locations, all right? A equals lines of S equals lines of T, which is teleportation. That's how it's set up, all right? Setting lines of switch line, what do we have in coordinates? What do we have in coordinates? What does it look like in travel? Right? It's amazing how I could change the space modulation lines into hieroglyphics, hieroglyphics, anything in that position, location, travel, right? Breaking down the A tracks, set lines of A lines of 3 travels in position, right? XT1001, mothership and center communications, right? XT2000 in line signal, okay? Setting core lines, high center interference into lines of 3 tractions, setting line communication lines of 2 lines of measure and set position operation, right? Change communication, flip the switch again, and line screen adaptation of surface, right? So again, switch it again, and line screen adaptation of surface and tractions, right? You're going to see different formulas in all settings. Why do you think you have the NEWS, guys? It's the current events of you in line rotations into film strip location lines that you are in track location to its system. Data position lines of high centers of 3 tractions, 4 lines, and 5 lines of signals. Getting platform communication high centers into lines of your primary circuits and travel. Direct lines of 0, direct lines of 1, it's 0, position of 1 in tractions and communications. Now the platitude line has a data import. That inlines it inlines to inceptions over screen. Directing lines course centers and triangulation in position of box in calculation lines into its mothership in travel in rotation system, all through calculations. That's how it's set up. Okay. All right, so the traffic inventory, yeah, with the old and with the new, right? 0 lines, core lines, zig line, high center, line rotation, sphere, location, setting, position of Skynet. Oh, too fast. Do it again and travel. There we go, right? So we got an A track in XT2, an A track in XT3, and then we get a DX line 1, and then we get an X line flighter that rotates the 1 line signal to X lines of 1 charter in position of wave, directing signal lines, ground line surface, and rotation surface and traction. Right, so what do we have in line communication system? We got a line screen adaptations all over the jump scar, 2 lines of tractions, X lines of 1, platitude lines, position locations. We got 1 indicates system, subtractions over 0, subtractions over 0. Sets all communication ground lines as surface. Now that relays its position of its programming. Directing lines and modification grounds, sets lines of 3 track lines, X lines of 1. Setting lines of communication lines, XT lines of router, line position of program, and calculation lines of grounds, in line rotation surface and track location. Okay. We flicked it up, switch lines. What do we have in travel communications? Oh, look at that. Disappeared. Right? It's amazing how we see the line screen. Right? Very complicated, but it's a lot of fun. So you have the ground lines, the setting of 1 in power line screen adaptation of center and communication system and travel. Okay? Now, modulation to the location grid. Now, the location grid allocates timeframes to the mothership that sets lines of communications, right? Directing lines of communication. That's bringing in tractions. There we are in setting. Okay? And the mothership is above in track locations. And set calculations, right? Or we get inline screen adaptation to its flux over lines of its DNA track location at setting. Process lines of signals, process calculation high center interference at overcross location screen lines, and inhibitors over line screen adaptations as track location. Let's get a ground line shift lines of anomaly and rotation spin cycles and traction. All right? Coming into what? The torcal fields and line screen adaptation of surface and track location. Okay, guys? It's getting a lot more confusing, isn't it? But it's a lot more fun, right? So I know there's a lot going on right now that you probably don't understand process of, but I just want you guys to understand set locations. I say we'll wait to get to 40 tracks, and I'll take you guys offline screen to your motherships and navigation. So everybody gets a little bit more understanding how this all works now in travel. Now you have to get into the modification grounds and line communication system all through traction. How to set it up. Okay. out of equation. Now you're back where you are, out of the mothership. Okay, and the reason I know that is because it disappeared. It's gone. See? It's not there anymore. So I know it's back in center. So I hope you guys enjoyed that. It's a lot to take in, isn't it? We can discuss it on Q&A. All right? Adios.